All right.
Well, Andrew Sheldon.
Barbara Ratner.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having it in this, I consider a sacred space
Well,
to be in your studio.
thank you. We're in my house. Andrew has come over and he's brought some artwork with him. Andrew gave a talk to this group back in November, which you can find on Facebook. And so a few of the questions I'll ask are related to that. He worked in civil rights as a lawyer and a jury consultant, and the emotional burdens of that drove him to painting at one point. So the first question is, I guess, was that the first time that you painted in your life after? No, you have other painting.
When I mostly retired, I say mostly because it's such a kind of a false, it's a misnomer about what happens at that point in your life. But anyway, I had a lot more time on my hands. And I decided to take a course over at Gallenwold, and this was about 10 years ago.
Oh.
It was a drawing course, and I loved it, and took another one, and another one, and I asked the instructor if he ever taught privately, and he said, oh yeah, I have a studio at home. So I ended up going to his studio. He's a Tunisian artist named Choya Saidi. He generally goes by the name Saidi, and I spent 3 years doing that. And he took me step by step through graphite to charcoal, from charcoal to colored pencils to watercolors to acrylics to oils. So by the time I was, after about 3 years of that every week and doing it all through the week.
That explains a lot, because I watched the video of your November discussion, and the very first painting, which was of Doug Jones hugging a woman who'd come in to be a witness.
One of the mothers of the dead girl.
Yeah, that is a powerful painting, and it's really well drawn. There's nothing amateurish about it, and I was just surprised, because I had the impression maybe that you had just started painting after that experience.
The transition represented in that painting is trying to figure out how I wanted to proceed with that collection, which was a pretty driven collection, as you know. And it was just to go from representational, which that painting was,
right,
to whatever was next, because I couldn't figure out how you express emotion representationally.
No, I agree.
And it was, because where the feelings for any painting were coming from was sort of unconscious to me. It would just kind of rise up in a dream, and then I would have to kind of figure out how to represent that on paper or canvas. So that was the last of the purely representational painting.
But it's still not straightforwardly representational. It's distorted in certain ways that give it more grip than it would have if it were a photograph of two people. And
would you like me to tell you about that moment?
Sure.
Okay.
I wish we had that painting. Maybe someone can post it when this goes up.
Sure. Mrs. Robertson was the mother of Carol Robertson, and she had been through this whole business about trying these cases back in 1964 and 5. So she'd been through it all at once, including surviving her grief in the death of her daughter Carol. And so the chief prosecutor, Doug Jones, who became Senator Jones, and I would go and sit on Mrs. Robertson's front porch in Birmingham and try to basically seduce her into coming into court, because we thought her testimony would be crucial. But she was in a wheelchair, she was not doing very well, and she very politely declined.
Yeah.
So we went away. 2 weeks later, we tried again, persistent. We really wanted this case to work. And this time she repeated her no. And so this painting was done on the first day of trial in Birmingham when Doug was getting ready to make some kind of presentation to get the case going that day. And I turned around and I saw Mrs. Robertson coming in, being wheeled by, I think, her nephew in a wheelchair coming down the aisle. And I said, Doug, you know, motioned him back to where she was coming, and I just started to weep, you know.
Yeah.
It was so important for her to be there. And she did, she testified.
Well, my other question relating to that era is whether your anger and sense of injustice has abated over the years, and did the art help with that?
In general, yes, the art helped. After, you know, 2 or 3 years of working on those paintings, various things happening, going through basically emotion and situation after emotion and situation, finally getting to the grief of it all. It felt like the bottom that I'd reached for myself. Was able to close my studio that was a rented studio because my wife thought I needed to get that kind of stuff out of the house. She said I was getting a little morose, is the word she put it. And so I did. I rented a studio in Avondale and did the work there. And so I closed it down, came home, and started painting landscapes again.
I guess the other question I have about that is, do you miss the kind of fire and emotional involvement that you must have had with that? I mean, do you feel that's same level of engagement when you're painting landscape? Seems to me to be pretty hard to
It's
do
different.
that. Yeah.
It's different. Those feelings come from a place in me that I don't frequent. You know, they just are there, and you have to deal with it. And the same with the whole collection. I mean, the images of those shoes, Denise's shoes, and that piece of cement that they took out of her head just stayed with me and kept coming and coming and coming. So finally it was like Uncle Charlie knocking on the door to come visit, you know. It was like, we're here, take care of this, you know.
Yeah.
And so the whole collection really did serve its purpose. And it was, you know, people would say, you know, you really ought to write a book because your involvement in 8 of these cases, nobody's had that kind of experience. And I said, you know, I can't imagine writing a book. I've written stuff in law or psych my whole life, and writing is just not the way this needs to go. So when painting came along, it was the answer.
Well, all right, so some more fun questions, or just basic stuff. Are you a native Atlantan, or did you come from somewhere?
I was born and raised in Miami.
Oh, and what year did you come to it?
1942 is when I was born, and I came up here in 1960.
Oh, long time then.
To go to Emory.
Okay. And let's see. Why did you choose oil? Did you just see that as a progression where you go through the various media and oil is really the goal? And
yeah, that's the right answer.
Okay.
And then once you're there, it's like, what else is there? You know, it's going to take some time. I don't know how much time I have, for example.
Right.
So being a senior artist puts different kind of bookends on things. And so, you know, if I spent the next 10 years trying to figure out oil, it would be like, you know, are we going to drink Chardonnay or Pinot Noir? You know, you have to spend some time with each one before you figure out what's involved. And so that's what I did with oil.
Did you draw as a child?
Some, yeah. No, I mean, but there were the usual, you know, 6th grade bombers coming across the page when I should be listening to the teacher, you know, that kind of stuff. My favorite car was an Austin Healey 3000, and I just drew that car over and over again. So.
That is so funny. I remember kids in my class, the boys drew bombers and cars.
That was the same era when we were instructed, at least in Florida, to go and pull down the curtains when we had an air raid.
Oh, yeah.
Duck and cover, it was called.
Right.
put your head down on the desk as if that was going to protect you from a nuclear blast, you know? Interesting.
Well, do you want to talk? You've brought some paintings, and maybe you ought to talk about your evolution from the one to the other, and you can hold them up.
Sure. This painting is from a workshop I did early on. I was trying to figure out if it would be a good idea to get some instruction from other people. And so this was in a Bill Davidson workshop. And I ended up really enjoying Bill's workshops, and so I probably have had 6 or 7 of those. Plus it's a good time to go out to Carmel and hang around a little bit. My wife is from Monterey, so she enjoys it, so we like to go out there. At any rate, this is a pretty good example of landscape, architectural landscape, I guess we call it, from the early days. And so a lot of my painting is landscapes and portraits. I do, a fair amount of portraits, mostly in oil, but occasionally in pastel. And pastel's a real interesting medium to me because it's something about the chalk that, doing whatever it's doing on the paper, that is different, and it's emotive in a different kind of way to me. And it's a little odd to say, to think about, but that's what happens. I mean, there's not a whole lot of difference, I think, between that kind of mark, I guess to call it, or brushstroke, and a pastel brushstroke. I mean, these are all kind of vaguely.
We had, our plein air group had a workshop, workshop in pastel, and I did it, and I'd never tried it before, and I was shocked by how much I liked it. And I think to me, it had to do, it was like drawing, it had to do with the connection. You could feel the paper through the pastel, as opposed to painting where I do watercolor, you do oil. You can feel the paper through the brush, but not.
It's different than when you put your finger on the
to
manipulate things.
Yeah,
it's real different.
Well, show me where you are now.
This is the most recent.
That's good.
I did this in a workshop with Margaret Dyer, a pastel workshop. I've only been to one of those with a live model, and the model is just an incredibly vivacious, energetic person. And so Margaret had us take as many pictures with our iPhones as we could get in the 15 minutes that she was going to ask the model to do various things. So at one point she was posed like this and she was laughing hysterically. And so I brought it home, put it up on the easel, and asked Anne about it, my wife, and she said, "Whoa, she's not laughing. She's terrified. She's in agony. I don't know." So then I realized that those two things graphically are kind of similar. And so I said, okay, well, that's the first painting in my next collection, which is another emotional based painful collection that goes the next step beyond grief into agony. To me, that's the as deep as rage is, and I did that one with the clan and the fire behind it. That was all about rage. That was a difficult painting to get through. But then beyond that is the agony and the despair that come from like chronic violence or chronic whatever it is. Every time you turn around, there's a lynching of some neighbor or somebody across town or somebody you know, or your children are being ripped away from you and sold to another plantation. All of that stuff, I just think I need to get into a little bit. So this collection is not about my feelings. It's about theirs.
I see. Wow, That is powerful. And maybe, well, we should bring this to some kind of a close probably, but I wondered if you had any advice for beginners, just, and this could be something trivial or something cosmic.
Well, that throws me into another question, which is, why do you paint?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I ask beginners, because if, like, when I can't do anything else, basically. When I stand up and the brush and the oils and everything's there and I'm ready, everything else goes away.
And that was another question. Yeah, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can stand there with my joints that are normally aching and I don't feel any of that. I'm just sort of transported. And I would say that's, I mean, if you can't do anything else. I used to say, the gates of heaven opened early for me. It's so wonderful to me after spending so much time in the intellectualized, combative world of litigation, to get away from that into places where people, your colleagues, are kind and gentle and helpful and, generally.
Not lawyers.
No, not generally, although there are some.
There are a few hidden lawyers probably.
And you want to find them and keep them. So, I mean, Bill Davis and I used to call ourselves, and he still does, I think, recovering lawyers.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that about him. Well, all right. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Just thank you for having me and letting us do this in your studio. I think other artist studios are terrific things to sit in.
That's true. They are all. It would be fun to do a tour of the studios.
Yeah.
All right.
I proposed that on one of the many things I proposed on the Virginia Highland website.
Except then you have to clean it up for everybody.
Yeah,
So,
or not,
well.
Or, I mean, you would, but
Yeah, I
lots of
would. I would
people
clean it up.
just don't have time for cleaning. You know how that is?
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.